My name is Ellie Warren. I was born and raised in a small town outside Portland, and I was 34 years old the night everything finally snapped in half. It was Christmas Eve, the kind of cold where the air feels sharp against your cheeks, and I remember thinking that the sky looked too peaceful for the way my chest was twisting. I had just pulled into my dad's driveway after work, still wearing my coat and boots, still carrying the silly little box of peppermint cookies I baked that morning, even though I told myself not to. I did it out of habit, I guess. Old patterns die slow. I should probably tell you this. Whenever I listen to long stories online, I am usually folding laundry or driving late at night, trying to make sense of my own life. What about you? What are you doing while listening to this one? I ask because the moment everything changed for me happened during the most ordinary motion. Just reaching for a doorknob with a box of cookies in my hand. I walked up the steps to his front porch, ready to ring the bell. The wreath on the door was lit with warm yellow lights, and for 1 second, I let myself feel something like hope. That old, aching hope that maybe this year would be different. But before I could knock, the door opened on its own. My dad Richard stood there blocking the doorway. He was wearing the red sweater Ethan got him 2 years earlier, the one he never let me help him pick out. His eyes ran over me in a way that made my throat tighten. That old familiar sting, the same way he'd looked at me since I was a teenager, as if seeing my face forced him to remember something he tried so hard to bury. He said, without even stepping aside, "Your face will ruin the holiday." Just like that. No hello, no explanation. The words dropped between us like a stone. I stood there on the porch with my mouth open, the cold seeping through my gloves, thinking, maybe I heard him wrong. But he didn't blink. He didn't even lower his voice, and I could hear laughter behind him, the sound of people getting settled around the dinner table. I asked him why. My voice sounded too small, too soft. He didn't hesitate. "Because every time I look at you, I see your mom, and I don't need that tonight." I swear, something inside me froze in place. My mom had left when I was 12, moved to Arizona with the man she'd been having an affair with, and she never really looked back. But somehow I was the one who had to carry the weight of her actions. Somehow my existence made me responsible for his pain. Richard crossed his arms and said, "I think it's best you go home, Ellie. We don't need any tension tonight." We. As if I wasn't part of that word. I didn't ask for more. I didn't remind him that he was the one who gave me a key to the house when I went to college, telling me it would always be my home. I didn't tell him I baked cookies, even though I knew he'd barely look at them. I didn't ask if Ethan knew. Something inside me went quiet. A kind of quiet that felt like the surface of a frozen lake, smooth and solid until it breaks. So I smiled, a steady, practiced, too calm smile. "Okay, I'll make your wish come true." I don't know why I said it that way. Maybe because I wanted him to feel the sharpness he kept handing me all these years. Or maybe because giving up the fight felt easier than begging for a place at a table where I clearly wasn't wanted. I turned and walked off the porch. The cold air hit my face, stinging the corners of my eyes. My breath came out in little white puffs. My boots crunched on the gravel driveway. I held the box of cookies tight enough to crush the plastic lid. Halfway to my car, the tears finally pushed through, warm against the freezing wind. I didn't sob, didn't break down. They just slipped out on their own, like my body had stopped waiting for my permission. When I reached my car door, I heard a burst of laughter from inside the house. I turned my head just enough to see through the living room window. The lights were warm, the table was set, and everyone was already gathered. Ethan was there. I recognized the shape of his shoulders and the way he leaned when he laughed. Next to his plate was a small white card, a little Christmas place setting, decorated with green holly leaves. My seat, or what should have been my seat, but they had replaced it with a decoration. A placeholder to fill the space where I was supposed to be. That was the moment the tears dried on my cheeks. It was the moment something in me shifted, so quietly that even I didn't catch. I did at first. A slow, heavy click in the back of my chest, like a door finally closing after years of being left cracked open. I opened my car door and sat down behind the wheel. The engine chimed when I pressed the button, and the radio lit up with some gentle Christmas song that made the silence inside me ring louder. I backed out of the driveway without looking toward the house again. As I turned onto the main road, the town looked exactly the same as every Christmas I remembered. Twinkling lights on rooftops, wreaths on street lamps, the faint glow of fireplaces in living room windows. But nothing looked the same from inside my car. For the first time in my life, I wasn't driving home from a holiday. I was driving away from one. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't have a plan. I just knew one thing with terrifying clarity. Tonight, I wasn't going to stay silent. If you've ever been cut out of your own family for a reason that made no sense, you probably know that feeling. And if you're listening to this right now, tell me where you're listening from. I want to know who else has lived through something like this. I kept driving, hands tight on the wheel, heart pounding in an unsteady rhythm. The farther I got from the house, the steadier my breathing became. What I didn't know yet was that this quiet drive away from my dad's Christmas dinner would be the first step into a storm I wasn't prepared for. I would learn soon enough that walking away has a way of shaking the ground behind you, and the people who pushed you out are never ready for the earthquake that follows. Chapter 2. The earthquake did not come that night. It came 3 days later, at noon on a Tuesday, when the sky over Portland was a flat gray and the snow on the sidewalks had turned into slush. I had not slept much since Christmas Eve. I went through the motions. Drove home. I put the peppermint cookies on my kitchen counter and then threw them in the trash an hour later when I caught myself staring at them like they were evidence of how foolish I was. I told my boss I had food poisoning, so I did not have to go into the office. I watched old reruns with the sound off and pretended that the silence in my apartment did not feel like it was closing in on me. On the third morning, I woke up with a dull ache behind my eyes and a thought that would not go away. His key. That house key had been on my key ring for almost 16 years. My dad gave it to Ethan and me when Ethan left for college and I was still in high school. He had stood in the kitchen back then and pressed one key into my palm and one into Ethan's. He said slowly, so neither of us would miss it. So you never have to stand on the porch waiting. This is always your home. I remember how warm his hand was that day, how proud I felt that he trusted me with something that felt like more than metal and teeth. It felt like a promise. Living on the edge of my bed 3 days after that Christmas, I realized that promise had expired a long time ago. I had just never admitted it. I got dressed in jeans and a heavy sweater, pulled my hair into a loose bun, and slid my keys into my coat pocket. The ring felt heavier than usual. I wrapped my fingers around the house key as I walked to my car like I was, holding something that did not belong to me anymore. The roads were mostly clear by then. A few dirty piles of snow sat at the edges of driveways and parking lots, but the main streets were wet and dark. I drove with the heat on low and the radio off, just listening to the sound of the tires on the pavement and my own heartbeat in my ears. I did not tell anyone where I was going. Not Ethan, not my friend Jenna from work, not even my grandma. This felt like something I had to do alone. Not a performance, not a scene, just a quiet correction of a lie I had been living with for too long. My dad's house looked exactly the same when I pulled up. Same gray siding, same front porch, same wreath with the little red berries on the door. Someone had shoveled the walkway. There was no car in the driveway except his truck. I parked on the street, took a breath so deep it hurt, and walked up to the front door. I did not ring the bell. For 16 years, he had told me I did not have to. I pulled out my keys, fingers shaking a little, found the familiar shape of the house key by touch, and slid it into the lock. The knob turned easily in my hand. The smell hit me first. Coffee, bacon, a hint of cleaning spray. So normal. So domestic. I stepped inside and shut the door behind me out of habit, then wiped my boots on the old mat he kept by the entryway. "Da," I called out, my voice sounding smaller than I wanted it to. There were sounds in the kitchen, a cupboard closing, the soft scrape of a chair pushed back. After a second, my dad appeared in the doorway that led to the hallway, a dish towel thrown over his shoulder. He stopped short when he saw me standing there. His eyes flicked to my hand still resting on the doorknob, then to the keyring in my other hand. "I thought I made things clear," he said, his tone flat and tired. Like I was an inconvenience that had dropped in at the wrong time. The words rolled over me, familiar in their harshness. I did not flinch this time. I did not apologize for being there. Instead, I walked past him, feeling his eyes on my back, and stepped into the kitchen. The table was bare now. The Christmas tablecloth was gone, replaced by the plain wooden surface I had done homework on as a kid. There was a mug by the sink and a plate with a few crumbs on it, proof of his solitary breakfast. I set my keys down in the middle of that table, the full ring at first, the metal clinking against the wood. Then I picked up just the one house key and separated it from the others. The little circle of silver looked almost harmless there, small and ordinary. My dad moved a little closer, not quite entering the room all the way. "What are you doing, Ellie?" he asked. I kept my eyes on the key. "I am giving you back something you do not want me to have." He frowned. "That is ridiculous." "It is not," I said. "You made it pretty clear on Christmas Eve that this is not my home, that you do not want me here." "The key does not match the truth anymore." His jaw tightened. "You are overreacting. It was one bad night." A laugh scraped out of my throat before I could stop it. One bad night. "David, you have been shutting me out since I was a teenager. That key has been lying for years." He opened his mouth like he might argue, then closed it again. His eyes slid away from mine to the window over the sink. I picked up the house key between my thumb and forefinger and slid it off the ring. My hands were trembling now. I laid the key neatly in the center of the table and pushed the rest of my keys back into my coat pocket. My car key, my apartment key, the little tag to the gym I rarely went to, the things that actually belong to my life now. "There," I said softly. "That feels more honest." My dad took a step into the kitchen then, the dish towel still over his shoulder. "You do not have to be dramatic about this, Ellie." Something in me snapped at that word. Dramatic. As if all the years of feeling invisible were just me putting on a show for attention. I turned to face him fully. My heart was pounding hard enough that I could feel it in my throat. My vision had a faint ring of light around the edges, but I forced myself to focus on his face. "You invited Ethan to Christmas," I said, each word slow. "You sat him at that table, in front of that window, in the sweater I helped him pick out for you, and you looked me in the eye on the porch and said my face would ruin your holiday. That is not me being dramatic. That is you being cruel." He flinched at that, a tiny movement around his mouth. "You look like your mom, Ellie." "It is hard." "I know, I look like Mom," I said. "I have seen my face in the mirror for 34 years. But I am not her. I did not walk out on you. I did not leave you for someone else. I stayed. I kept showing up. I kept trying to be enough for you to see me as anything other than her ghost." The kitchen felt smaller suddenly, as if the walls had leaned in to hear us. My chest was tight. I took a breath that did not quite make it all the way down. For a second, he looked lost, like a man standing in the wrong house. His shoulders sagged. Then he straightened again, stubborn as ever. "It is not that simple," he muttered. "It is for me," I said. "For 15 years, I have bent myself into every shape, trying to fit around your pain. I came to every holiday dinner. I ignored the way you lit up when Ethan walked into the room and went quiet when I did. I laughed off your comments about my eyes or my voice or the way I stand. I told myself if I just kept trying, one day you would choose to see me instead of her." My hands were clammy. A wave of dizziness washed over me, but I gripped the back of one of the kitchen chairs to stay upright. "I am done," I said, my voice low but steady. "I am not begging for basic love anymore. I am not going to keep asking you to treat me like your daughter. If that is not something you can do, then this key belongs with you, not me." He stared at me, breathing a little harder now. "You are really willing to throw away your family over this?" The irony of that almost made me laugh again. "I am not throwing away anything. I am just finally acknowledging that you already did." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly. My heart thudded against my ribs with a strange, uneven rhythm. There was a sharp ringing in my ears, like I had just come out of a loud concert. I took one step toward the doorway. then another. The floor seemed to tilt under my feet. I loosened my grip on the chair and reached for the edge of the counter too. Steady myself, but my fingers slid a little on the smooth surface. "Elle," my dad said, his voice closer now. "You okay?" The room narrowed, his face blurred at the edges. I tried to answer, to tell him I just needed a second, but the words got stuck somewhere in my chest. I took one more step toward the hallway, and the light over the kitchen table seemed to swell, too bright, swallowing everything else. The doorway stretched away from me, far, far back, like I was looking at it through the wrong end of a telescope. My fingers went numb. My knees loosened. The last thing I remember seeing before everything went dark was that little house key on the table, a single silver shape against the wood, sitting exactly where I had left it. Chapter 3. My knees gave out before my brain really understood what was happening. 1 second, I was focusing on that little silver key on the table, and the next, the floor rushed up at me in a way that did not feel real. It was like someone tipped the whole house on its side. My hand slid off the counter and my shoulder hit something hard. Then there was a sharp crack of pain at the back of my head and everything jolted sideways. There was a heavy thud, and after a second I realized it was my own body hitting the kitchen floor. For a moment it was strangely quiet inside my head. No thoughts, just a hollow ringing, like someone had struck a bell very far away. I heard my dad say my name. At least, I think he did. It sounded low and startled, like it came from the bottom of a well. "Ellie." Another beat, and then his voice again, louder, cracked open, with something I was not used to hearing from him. "Elle, hey, answer me. Come on." I tried to say something, to tell him I was fine, that I just needed a second. My tongue felt thick. My body did not seem interested in getting up. The ceiling above me swam in and out of focus, the light fixture blooming and shrinking like a slow heartbeat. There were footsteps. Then his face was above mine, closer than it had been in years. His eyes were wide, his hair a little messy, like he had run a hand through it without thinking. He knelt on the floor next to me and slid one hand under my head, wincing when his fingers found the spot that hurt. "You hit your head," he said, more to himself than to me. "You are not supposed to do that, kiddo." He had not called me that in a very long time. I wanted to tell him again that I was fine, that this was nothing, that he did not need to worry. The words would not line up. My chest felt tight and my breaths came shallow, like my lungs were trying to pull air through a straw. He fumbled with something above me. There was the rustle of fabric. The scrape of a chair moved out of the way. The clatter of the dish towel hitting the floor. Then I heard the faint beep of buttons and the distant ring of a phone. His voice shifted when the call connected. It went from broken and frightened to clipped and too loud. "This is Richard Warren at my house on Maple Ridge Drive. My daughter just collapsed in my kitchen. She hit her head. She is not answering me properly. I think she passed out." I could barely hear the response on the other end, just a calm, practiced tone. He snapped back. "No, she is not drunk. She is not on anything. She just was talking and then she went down." His other hand gripped my shoulder like he was afraid the floor might swallow me. He paused, listening, then said in a shaking voice, "Her breathing is weird. She is kind of here, but not really. You just need to get here. Please get here." He listened again and then said, "Yeah, I can check her pulse. Just tell me what to do." His thumb pressed against the inside of my wrist. His hand was shaking hard enough that I could feel it. For so many years, I had not been able to read his face. That day, even half conscious, I could read everything. He was terrified. The person on the phone must have told him to calm down, because his voice dropped a little, but the fear did not leave. "Yes, I will stay on the line." "Yes, I can do that." "No, I do not think she is bleeding. I do not see any blood." "Ellie, can you hear me? Squeeze my hand if you can hear me." I tried. I really did. My fingers twitched a little around his. Or maybe that was just his imagination. The edges of the room kept going soft and then sharp again. Time got weird after that. I remember the distant wail of a siren, faint at first, and then growing louder, until it seemed to vibrate through the walls. I remember my dad swearing under his breath, a rough sound I had never heard from him in front of me before. I remember the thump of heavy boots on the front porch and the door swinging open. Voices filled the kitchen. A woman's voice, calm but firm, asking how long I had been on the floor, what had happened, how I fell. A man's voice, deeper, asking for my age, if I had any medical conditions, if I was on any medications. 34, my dad said quickly. She is 34. She was just talking, and then she went down. She has been under a lot of stress, but she is healthy. She works full-time. She is not sick that I know of. Does she have any history of seizures? The woman asked. No, he said right away. At least I do not think so. Ellie, do you have anything like that? I wanted to roll my eyes and say, you would know if you had asked a single question about my life in the last decade. But my tongue felt like it weighed 100 pounds. Hands moved over me, professional and quick. Fingers checked my pupils. A cuff tightened around my arm and then slowly released. A light flicked back and forth in front of my face. Her blood pressure is low, the woman said. My heart rate is high. We need to transport. There was a rattle and a clank as they brought the gurney in. My body was lifted carefully, rolled to one side, then the other. A stiff board slid under me. Then I was moved again. Every motion made the room spin. My dad hovered at my shoulder, so close I could smell the coffee on his breath. He kept asking if I was okay, if I could hear him, if I needed anything, as if anything he could hand me in that moment would fix the last 15 years. I caught a glimpse of the ceiling as they rolled me toward the front door, the light in the hallway, the framed pictures on the wall, the one at the end of the hallway that had been turned face down years ago after my mom left. It was all there, exactly the same as it had always been, and yet nothing felt familiar. When they got me to the doorway, my dad reached out. His hand hovered over my arm, then my fingers. He almost took my hand. I saw it in slow motion, the way his shoulder moved, the way his fingers curled. Then he stopped halfway and pulled back, his hand balling into a fist at his side. He was inches away from touching me, and he still could not quite do it. They loaded me into the back of the ambulance. The air inside was cooler, smelling faintly of metal and antiseptic. The female paramedic climbed in with me, adjusting wires and straps, while the male paramedic closed the back doors with a dull slam. The siren started again, loud and close now. A long, rising cry that made the thin mattress under me vibrate. My dad's face appeared at the open side door for just a second before they closed it. His expression looked strange. Not angry, not disappointed, just stripped bare. His eyes were shiny, his mouth pressed into a hard line, the lines around his forehead deeper than I remembered. He asked if he could ride along. I heard the paramedic say, "You can sit up front with the driver, sir, but you need to let us do our work back here." The engine rumbled. The ambulance lurched forward. The world outside the small side window turned into a smear of gray and white. The paramedic inside with me kept talking, asking questions in a steady voice. Did I have chest pain? Any numbness? How long I had felt this dizzy? I tried to answer. Sometimes the words got out. Sometimes they stayed stuck in my head, where only I could hear them. At one point, a particularly sharp bump in the road jolted the stretcher, and my eyes flew open wider for a second. The brightness inside the cabin cleared just enough for me to see through the narrow window into the front. My dad was there in the passenger seat, hunched slightly forward, his hands clenched together in his lap. He had turned halfway in his seat so he could look back toward me, even though all he could really see was the edge of the gurney and my feet. For a moment, our eyes met in the reflection on the glass between us. His face looked pale, almost gray. I had never seen that expression on him before. Not when my mom left, not at funerals, not at any hard moment I could remember. It was not anger. It was not resentment. It was fear. Real, bone-deep fear. He looked at me like a man who had just realized that the one thing he had been pushing away all these years might vanish for good, and that no amount of stubborn pride could bring it back. The paramedic adjusted the oxygen under my nose and told me to just focus on breathing slowly. In through the nose, out through the mouth. I tried to do what she said. Each breath felt like it had weights attached, but they kept coming. The siren wailed again as we turned a corner. My vision narrowed to a small tunnel, my dad's outline in the glass, shrinking to a blur. Then the sounds folded in on themselves. like someone was closing a door between me and the world, and everything slid back into the dark. Chapter 4. I woke to the sound of wheels rolling over tile and the faint echo of voices bouncing off high ceilings. The lights above me were too bright, a row of white squares sliding across my vision as the stretcher moved. Someone said my name, close to my ear, gentle but firm, telling me to stay awake if I could. I tried to answer, but the words stuck to the roof of my mouth like thick syrup. When the stretcher stopped, the world steadied just enough for shapes to form. A curtain rail, a metal tray, a nurse with dark hair pulled into a tight bun. She tapped something into a tablet and called out numbers that did not mean anything to me. Blood pressure is low. My heart rate is high. Get the doctor. The air smelled like disinfectant and old coffee. A man in scrubs appeared at the foot of the bed. He looked middle-aged, with tired eyes, the kind that had seen far too many late nights in a hospital. He checked my pulse, his fingers cool against my wrist, then shined a small light across each of my eyes. I winced, turning my head slightly. He said something to the nurse, then leaned over me. "Miss Warren, can you hear me? I need you to try to stay with us. You collapsed and may have hit your head. We are checking for anything serious, but you are stable for now." His voice faded in and out as if I was underwater. Stable. The word felt strange, like it did not belong to me. My body did not feel stable. It felt hollow and overheated and trembling all at once. Someone adjusted the bed so I was more upright. I felt a cuff squeeze my arm again. A cold stethoscope pressed to my chest. A thermometer brushed my forehead. Through the blur, I saw movement just beyond the curtain. A familiar shape, broad shoulders, a worn jacket. Dad. He was pacing in the hallway, running his hand across his face, fingers pressing into his brow like he could push the guilt back inside if he did it hard enough. He glanced toward the curtain every few seconds, each time stopping short like he wanted to pull it open but did not think he was allowed. The nurse parted the curtain slightly to step out, and I saw him more clearly. His hair was mussed like he had been gripping it, and for the first time in a very long time, I saw something raw in his eyes. Not annoying, not disappointment, just fear. Cold, unsettled fear. The nurse brushed past him and he stepped aside too fast, like he did not trust his own body to be near mine. She called out to someone down the hall, and a few seconds later, the curtain pulled open again. A different nurse rolled a portable monitor next to my bed and clipped a sensor onto my finger. The beeping steadied into a slow rhythm. My dad finally spoke. His voice cracked. "Is she going to be all right?" The doctor glanced over while adjusting the IV they had placed in my arm. "She is dehydrated, has low blood sugar, and significant stress symptoms. She needs rest and fluids. We are running blood work and monitoring her head injury, but right now she is stable." That word again, stable. It did not feel like mine, but hearing it made something unclench inside me. The curtain swayed as my dad stepped closer. He hesitated near the side of the bed, as if unsure whether he belonged there. His hand lifted, hovered in the air above mine, then dropped back to his side. He swallowed hard. I did not know she was this bad. The doctor's tone stayed even. People under long-term emotional strain sometimes do not show it until their body forces the issue. She will need time to recover. My dad nodded stiffly, but I could tell he was barely holding it together. His eyes kept darting to the heart monitor. A voice burst into the hallway outside. "Where is she? Where is my granddaughter?" My grandma Grace moved faster than I had seen her move in years. She wore a long coat, hair tucked into a wool hat, cheeks flushed from the cold and from panic. When she reached the curtain, she stopped only long enough to get her bearings before pushing it aside and stepping into the room. The moment she saw me hooked up to machines, her whole face crumpled. "My sweet girl," she whispered, rushing to my side and taking my free hand between hers. Her palms were warm and familiar, grounding me in a way nothing else had since I collapsed. She looked at the doctor with wide, pleading eyes. "Is she going to be all right?" The doctor gave her the same answer she gave me one. "Dad." Grandma nodded slowly, processing every word. Then she turned, very deliberately, to the man standing stiffly at the end of my bed. "What did you do to her?" My dad straightened. "Mom, not here." Her voice rose. "No, it will be here. It has to be here. How could you treat your daughter like this?" Daughter. The way she said it made the air in the room shift. My dad flinched like he had been slapped. "Mom, I did not do anything. You stood on your porch and told her she would ruin your holiday. You told your own child that her face disgusts you because it reminds you of her mom. Do not stand there and pretend you do not know exactly what you have done." He opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. His voice came out smaller than I expected. "She looks like Linda." "It is hard for me." Grandma's eyes blazed. "She is not your ex-wife. She is your child. You are punishing her for something she had no part in. You have been doing it for years." The doctor stepped out, giving us space. My grandma squared her shoulders, ready for a fight she had been holding back for far too long. My dad shook his head as if trying to clear it. "Mom, you do not understand." "I understand perfectly. I have watched this unfold for 15 years. I have watched Ellie bend and twist herself just to earn a scrap of kindness from you. I have watched her walk into every room, hoping you might finally see her, and you chose to look through her like she was a ghost." His voice rose. "She reminds me of things I do not want to remember. You do not know what it was like when Linda left." Gran took one sharp step toward him. "And you think Ellie does not? She was 12. 12, Richard. She lost her mom. Then she lost her dad in the same year. You just kept breathing in the same house with her, but you stopped being her dad." My heart clenched. Hearing those words out loud felt like someone had opened a window in a sealed room. Out in the hallway, another voice called out, shaky and urgent. "Dad." "Gran, where is she? Is she okay?" "Ethan." He appeared beside Grandma, cheeks pink from running across the hospital parking lot. When he saw me on the bed, his whole expression collapsed. He moved to my side and gripped the bed rail. "Oh God, Ellie." "What happened? Are you awake? Can you hear me?" I wanted to say yes, to comfort him, to make that look of panic disappear, but my throat felt thick again. My dad stepped in, defensive. "She fainted in the kitchen. She hit her head. The ambulance came fast." Ethan stared at him. "What do you mean she fainted? Why did she faint? What were you saying to her?" The hallway grew unusually quiet. Even the monitors seemed to hush for a moment. My dad's jaw tightened. "This is not the time." "It is absolutely the time," Ethan shot back. "You pushed her too far. You did this." My dad's head snapped up. "I did not make her faint." "You made her life a nightmare," Ethan said, voice rising. "And you refused to see it. Every year, every holiday, every time you acted like I was the only one who mattered. Look where it got us." My dad's face turned red. "You do not get to talk to me like that. Then start acting like a dad." Ethan's voice broke. For once. Gran stepped between them with her hand raised. "Stop. Right now. This hospital is not going to be another battleground. You will calm down and listen, both of you." My dad looked away, chest rising and falling sharply. Ethan swallowed hard and put a hand to his forehead, trying to steady his breath. Through the half-open curtain, I could see the outline of their shoes, the soft scuffle as they shifted weight. The tension was so thick it felt like a second pulse in the room. The doctor returned briefly with some notes on a clipboard. She informed them that I needed rest and that only one visitor at a time would be allowed once I was moved to observation. She stepped back out as quietly as she came. Then the arguing began again. Lower this time, like they were trying to keep it contained, but failing. Gran said softly, "Richard, she needs you to show up as her dad. Not as a wounded man stuck in the past," my dad whispered back. "You know nothing about how I felt when Linda left. I know enough to see you let it poison every good thing you still had," Gran replied. And Ellie paid the price. Something inside me snapped open. A sound escaped me. A small whimper or a breath pulled too sharply. I could not stop it. The curtain trembled slightly as someone touched it from the other side. A soft hush fell over the hallway. Gran whispered, "Ellie, honey, can you hear us?" I could not answer. I could barely open my eyes, but tears slipped out, slow and warm, sliding along the edge of my face. Not from pain this time, not from fear, from relief. For the first time in my adult life, someone stood for me. Someone said the things I had swallowed for years. My grandma sounded like she might cry too. Then footsteps shifted, and I sensed Ethan kneel close beside the bed. Dad whispered my name in a tone I had not heard from him since I was a kid, a tone filled with regret. And as their voices blurred together in a mess of guilt and love and everything they had never said, something inside me finally loosened. The curtains swayed gently, and I let the quiet tears fall. Because for the first time in a very long time, I realized I was not alone in this fight. I was not invisible. I was not unheard. I drifted again. But this time, the darkness felt softer, like I was being held instead of dropped. Chapter 5. I woke again to softer light, the kind that comes through half-closed blinds in the late afternoon. The beeping was slower now. My head felt heavy but not spinning. A nurse checked on me every so often, speaking in a calm voice that made the whole room feel like it was wrapped in cotton. By evening, they moved me to an observation room with pale blue walls and a window that looked out over the parking lot. I drifted in and out of sleep, catching pieces of conversation outside the door, but nothing sharp or heated like before. Every time I opened my eyes, either Grandma or Ethan was sitting quietly nearby. My dad kept his distance. I never saw him come into the room, but I sometimes heard his voice down the hall, low and uneven. The next morning, the doctor came in with a clipboard and said the collapse was caused by stress, exhaustion, and low blood sugar, mixed with a mild concussion from the fall. She wanted someone to stay with me for at least a week. I said I could go home, but Ethan stepped in before I finished the sentence. "She is staying with me," he said firmly. "I already talked to the nurse. We are taking her home as soon as you clear her." Grandma nodded beside him. "That is exactly what will happen. No arguments, Ellie." For once, I did not argue. By late afternoon, I was packed into Ethan's car, wrapped in a blanket Grandma insisted I take. The cold air outside hit my cheeks as he pushed the wheelchair toward the exit, and every step made the day feel more real. My dad stood near the sliding doors, hands in his coat pockets, watching but not approaching. When our eyes met, he nodded slightly. I nodded back. Nothing more. The drive to Ethan's place took about 20 minutes. He lived in a quiet neighborhood in Beaverton, a 2-story townhouse with a small porch and a garden he always forgot to water. His place smelled faintly of cinnamon, probably from the candles he lit whenever he remembered to close the windows. Inside, everything looked neat, in that way only single men manage. Straight lines and clean surfaces, but with an odd pile of mail on the kitchen, counter and sneakers near the couch. He set my bag in the guest room and told me to lie down while he made tea. A few minutes later, the doorbell rang. He opened it without checking, which meant he already knew who it was. Luna walked in holding a container of soup and a small stack of folded blankets. She was tiny and quick, her hair in a messy bun, and her scrubs still wrinkled from her shift. She gasped when she saw me propped up on the couch. "Oh my God, Ellie," she said, rushing over. "Are you okay? How is your head? Do you feel nauseous? Are you dizzy?" I laughed weakly. "One question at a time, Nurse Luna." She rolled her eyes but sat beside me, taking my hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. Ethan placed a mug of tea on the coffee table and sank into the armchair across from us. We sat in silence for a moment, the kind of silence that does not need filling. Then Luna squeezed my hand again. "You scared the hell out of us." I looked down at the blanket covering my legs. I scared myself, too. That opened something inside me. Not a dramatic floodgate, just a small ache that rolled upward until it reached my throat. My chest tightened. I breathed slowly, but the feeling kept rising. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Do you want to talk about it?" I watched the steam curl from the mug, then nodded. It came out in pieces at first, not a clean timeline, just fragments. All the times my dad missed things he should not have missed. The piano recital where I sat on stage scanning the crowd for his face, and never found it. The middle school science fair where he dropped me off but did not stay. My high school graduation, where he showed up late, shook my hand like I was a coworker, and left early, leaving only one awkward photo taken by a teacher. My 18th birthday, where he called at 8 in the evening and said he forgot. As I talked, the memories grew sharper. The hollow space in every milestone, the weight of always pretending it didn't bother me. Luna listened with her arms folded over her knees, her eyes soft but unflinching. Ethan stared at the floor for most of it, his jaw clenched, his thumbs pressing into each other like he was trying to keep still. I stopped a few times to breathe. My voice shook more than I wanted it to. Every time I paused, Luna or Ethan waited, patience thick in the air. Finally, I said, "He loved you so easily, Ethan. But with me, every day felt like a test I could never pass." Ethan looked up. His eyes were glassy. "Elle, I know." That surprised me. "You know." He nodded, blinking hard. "I always knew." Not at first, but by high school, I saw it. The way he talked to you, the way he looked through you, the way he bragged about my grades and barely acknowledged yours, even when they were better. I saw all of it. I felt my chest tighten. "Then why did you not say anything?" His voice cracked. "Because I was afraid." That word hung there, cold and honest. Afraid of what? Afraid of losing the only version of him I got to keep. Afraid that if I called him out, he would pull away from me too. I was a coward, Ellie. I held on to being the son he liked because I knew how quickly he turned. Distant. I did not want to be on the outside with you. My breath caught a little. Hearing him say it so plainly hurt in a way I did not expect, but it also made everything make sense. Luna reached across me and smacked his knee lightly. "Ethan Warren, you absolute idiot." He laughed once, a hard, shaky sound. "I know. I should have stood up for you. I should have asked questions. I should have refused to go to that Christmas dinner without you. I just wish I had done better." His shoulders slumped. For a moment, he looked younger, like he was that same kid who followed our dad's approval like sunlight. I stared at him, tired and raw and unsure what to say. Part of me wanted to be angry at him. Part of me wanted to reach across the room and hug him. Instead, I just told the truth. "Thank you for saying it." He nodded. "I am sorry, Elle. Really sorry." Luna tapped my shoulder. "Hey, you are not alone anymore. Not in this." I swallowed hard. My throat felt thick again, but the ache in my chest had loosened just a bit. We sat that way for a while, leaning back into the sofa cushions, the room warm and quiet. The fireplace flickered, though Ethan had forgotten to turn on the actual heat setting. Luna pulled an extra blanket over me anyway. At some point, Ethan stepped into the kitchen to warm the soup. Luna checked my pulse and blood pressure with the small cuff she kept in her bag. She said everything was looking better. I closed my eyes, letting the sounds blend into a soft blur. The clink of spoons, water running at the sink, the faint hum of the refrigerator. Then my phone buzzed against the couch cushion. I reached for it slowly. When the screen lit up, my stomach dropped. A long message from my dad filled the screen. More text than he had sent me in years. "Can I come see you?" I stared at the words until they blurred. My fingers hovered over the reply box, but I did not type anything. Not yet. I locked the phone, set it face down beside me, and let the silence settle over the room again, feeling the weight of everything I was not ready to answer. Chapter 6. The phone stayed face down beside me through the rest of that evening. I could feel the weight of my dad's message in the room, even when no one mentioned it. After dinner, Ethan insisted I sleep in the guest room so he could keep an eye on me. Luna left only after double-checking my vitals and giving Ethan a list of signs to watch for. I drifted in and out of sleep, waking to the sound of rain tapping gently against the window. By morning, the headache had eased, but the heaviness in my chest had not. 2 days later, Ethan drove me to my first therapy appointment. The hospital doctor had recommended someone nearby, a woman named Dr. Marlene Brooks, who had decades of experience working with adult children of fractured families. The clinic was in a converted craftsman house off a quiet street lined with tall cedar trees. It had a blue porch swing and warm yellow lights glowing through the windows. Nothing about it felt clinical or intimidating. Inside, the waiting room smelled faintly of lavender. There were shelves filled with books and a basket of blankets folded neatly in the corner. Everything about the place felt soft, like it was made for people who were tired of being strong. Dr. Brooks stepped out of her office right on time. She was in her late 50s, with kind eyes and salt and pepper hair pinned loosely at the back. She wore a simple cardigan and slacks, the sort of outfit that made her look like someone you might talk to in line at the grocery store. She smiled at me in a way that made something inside my chest ease. She said she was glad I came. She spoke in a warm, steady tone, slow enough that I did not feel rushed to match her pace. When I sat down on the couch in her office, she handed me a cup of water and told me just to start wherever my mind felt drawn. I hesitated, unsure where that even was. She waited without pushing. I finally began with Christmas Eve. The porch, the words my dad used, the look on his face, then the kitchen, the key on the table, the collapse. I told her how the room spun, how my dad looked at me like I was slipping away, how Ethan looked guilty, how Grandma finally exploded after years of silence. I expected her to interrupt or ask clarifying questions, but she simply nodded as I talked, leaning in slightly as if following the twists in my story with careful attention. When I paused, she asked gently, what part of all that felt the heaviest? I stared at my hands. I think it was realizing how familiar that pain was. I've been carrying it so long that I convinced myself it was normal. She nodded again, her expression softening. She said that sometimes the injuries we receive early in life settle into the body so deeply that we forget they are injuries at all. She said that children learn what love is from how it is given. If love is inconsistent, they learn to work for it. If love is withheld, they learn to chase it. If love is tied to someone else's wounds, they learn to tiptoe around the edges of those wounds for the rest of their lives. The words landed in my chest like stones. I told her that for years I tried to be the version of myself my dad might finally want. Quiet, helpful, never demanding anything, never upset, never too visible. I did not admit it out loud until that moment, but I told her that on some level, I always believed I caused something, that I reminded him of my mom too much, that if I could just be better in enough ways, maybe he would forgive me for a resemblance I never chose. Dr. Brooks folded her hands on her lap and said something that seemed to pull the entire room. Still, she said that I had spent 22 years trying to earn a love that should have already been mine. She said that what I had been reaching for was not approval or praise or attention. It was something simpler and more profound. Unconditional love. The words pierced me cleanly, like they were aimed at the part of me I had kept hidden, even from myself. My throat tightened. My chest shook. My eyes filled without warning. I tried to look away, but she told me there was no need to apologize for feeling anything. She said that tears often come when the truth finally finds a voice. I covered my face with both hands and let myself cry. Not the quiet tears I was used to hiding, but deep, shaking sobs that felt like they were scraping 20 years of grief out of my ribs. I cried for the little girl who stood by the window at 12, waiting for her mom to come back. I cried for the teenager who wore dresses she did not like because her dad said they looked more mature. I cried for the young woman who spent every Christmas hoping the next one would hurt less. When the storm eased, I wiped my cheeks with the back of my hand. My voice came out rough when I finally spoke. I have been trying to fill the space she left, I said, and I have been punished for reminding him that the space even existed. Dr. Brooks nodded slowly. That is often what happens when a child becomes the symbol of a parent's unhealed wound. You did nothing wrong, but you were treated as if you did. A fresh ache rose in my throat, but it did not overwhelm me. Instead, it made me feel strangely lighter, as if naming the truth loosened something that had been stuck for years. We talked about patterns after that. How I learned to shrink myself. How I learned to avoid conflict at any cost. How I learned to measure my worth through someone else's temperature. Not in dramatic psychological terms, but in simple language that made sense to me. She said it would take time to build new patterns, but that it was possible. When the session was nearly over, she told me to pay attention to any instinct to blame myself over the next few days. She said that healing often begins the moment blame shifts back to where it belongs. I walked out of her office feeling exhausted, but steady. Ethan was waiting in the car with the engine running and hot coffee in the console. He watched my face as I climbed in, trying to read whether the appointment had helped or hurt. I told him softly that it helped. He exhaled, like he had been holding his breath for an hour. We were halfway back to his place when my phone rang. The screen lit up with Grandma's name. I answered, and her voice came through fast and breathless, the way it did when she was trying to keep her emotions from spilling over. She said that my dad had been calling her all morning, that he had left her 3 messages, that something in him had cracked open. She said he told her he was looking for a therapist. He wanted to find someone to talk to, someone who could help him understand why he kept hurting the people he loved. He is scared, Grandma said. I think he is scared of losing you for good. I pressed my hand to my chest and felt my heart kick against my palm. I stared out the window at the passing trees, trying to make sense of the shift happening inside me. My dad had never once sought help for anything. Not grief, not anger, not fear. That he would even consider it felt unreal. When the call ended, I sat quietly, letting the road noise settle around me. Ethan did not ask anything. He just drove, his jaw tight, his hands steady on the wheel. For a long moment, I did not move. I simply breathed and tried to feel my way through the mix of shock and sadness and something else I could not quite name. The idea of my dad sitting in front of a therapist felt impossible. Like imagining a mountain bending, like imagining a closed door pushing open on its own. But Grandma would not lie about something like that. Not to me. I looked down at my hands resting in my lap. They were still trembling faintly, though I was not sure if it was from the session or the news. For the first time in my life, my dad was choosing to face something without hiding behind anger or silence. The world felt different at that moment. Unsteady. Shifting. I leaned back in the seat, closed my eyes, and let the hum of the car steady me, not ready to imagine what it might mean, but unable to ignore how it made the ground beneath me tilt ever so slightly. Chapter 7. Ethan noticed when I went quiet in the passenger seat. He glanced over as we waited at a light, the gray sky reflected in the windshield. You want to talk about it? He asked, but I just shook my head and said I needed a little time to let it sink in. He nodded and did not push. The week that followed moved in slow, careful steps. Ethan kept me on his couch or in the guest room, making sure I ate real meals instead of crackers and coffee. Luna stopped by almost every day after her shifts at the hospital to check my vitals and pretend she was just there for the company. Grant called each evening to ask how I was feeling and to talk about anything except my dad. At least until I was the one who brought him up. My phone stayed quieter than usual. A few friends from work sent short messages saying they heard I had a health scare and hoped I was okay. I told them it was just stress, which was true and not nearly enough at the same time. My boss texted to tell me I could take as much time as I needed. I stared at that message for a long time, wondering how I had become the woman whose body had to fail before anyone. Believed she was overwhelmed. My dad did not call me directly, not for a little while. Instead, he called Grandma, and he called Ethan. I heard about those calls secondhand. He asked how I was sleeping. He asked what the doctors had said. He asked if I was still angry. He never asked to talk to me, which hurt and relieved me in equal measure. A few days after my session with Dr. Brooks, I woke to the sound of a soft knock on the guest room door. Ethan cracked it open and leaned against the frame, holding a plain white envelope in his hand. He looked like a man carrying something heavier than paper. This came to my place, he said, holding it up. From Dad. He asked me to give it to you when you were ready. I sat up slowly, my head still tender but clearer than it had been. Ready, I thought. I was not sure I knew what that meant anymore, but I reached out for the envelope anyway. His handwriting was on the front, the same uneven script I remembered from school permission slips and birthday cards when I was small. Seeing my name written by his hand sent a strange jolt through me. It had been a long time since he wrote to me instead of texting or leaving short, stiff messages on voicemail. Ethan watched my face. Do you want me to stay while you read it? He asked. I hesitated. then nodded. "Stay." He came in and sat in the desk chair across from the bed while I slid my finger under the sealed edge and opened the envelope. Inside was a folded sheet of lined paper, torn from a notebook. No letterhead, no formality, just my dad and a pen, and whatever he had been brave enough to put down. The first thing that struck me was the length. This was not the kind of apology he had sent from the hospital, those few clipped words asking if he could see me, if I was mad, if we could put it behind us. This was longer, the ink pressed into the page in places where he must have paused and started again. I took a breath and began to read. He wrote that he had started seeing a therapist. He did not dress it up. He simply said that after watching me collapse on the kitchen floor, something broke inside him that he could not tape back together with silence and stubbornness this time. He wrote that the therapist had asked him to list all the moments he could remember where he chose his pain over his children. He said that list had my name on it far more often than Ethan's. I felt my chest pull tight as my eyes moved down the page. He wrote about my middle school band concert, the one where I played the clarinet solo and scanned the crowd for him, and did not see him. He admitted that he had been sitting in the parking lot the whole time that evening, watching other parents walk in, unable to make himself go inside because he was afraid he would see my mom's face in mine under the stage lights. He wrote about the day I won an award for a short story in high school. I had invited him to the small ceremony in the library. He told me he had to work late that night. In the letter, he admitted he had not been at work at all. He had gone home and sat at the kitchen table, staring at an old photo of me, Mom holding me as a baby, telling himself that if he went to the ceremony, he would be reminded too much of what he had lost. He wrote about my college graduation, how he stood in the back, barely clapped when my name was called, and left early, pretending he had an urgent call. He confessed that the truth was simpler and uglier. When he saw me in the cap and gown, smiling despite how distant he had been, he felt so much shame for how he had treated me that he did not know how to stay. His solution, as usual, was to walk away. The words on the page began to blur. I blinked hard and kept reading. He did not say he was doing his best. He did not say he meant well. He did not say he had been broken by my mom and could not help it. For once, he did not make excuses. He wrote one line that cut straight through me. I chose my anger and my grief over you. Not once, not twice. Over and over, for years. He wrote that it was no accident, no slip of the tongue or bad day. It was a pattern he leaned on because it was easier to stay angry at a 12-year-old girl who looked like his ex-wife than to face the adult woman who had hurt him and walk through that pain in a healthy way. He wrote that recognizing it made him sick, that he had gone home from his therapist's office and thrown up in the bathroom because the weight of it finally hit him. He wrote that he did not expect me to forgive him, that he understood that I might never want to see him again, that if he were in my position, he was not sure he would want to either. He wrote that he needed me to know one thing with absolute clarity, that his cruelty and his distance and his sharp words were never a reflection of my worth. They were a reflection of his refusal to deal with his own wounds. By the time I reached the end of the letter, my hands were shaking. Tears had slipped down onto the page, smudging a few words, but I could still make them out. I folded the paper slowly and then unfolded it again, staring at the sentence where he had written that he chose anger over me. There was no comfort in that admission. Not really. It did not undo the years I had spent twisting myself into shapes to try to fit inside his shadows. But it did something else. It placed responsibility where it belonged. Ethan kept his gaze on the floor while I read, giving me a strange sort of privacy. When I was done, I handed him the letter without a word. He read it quietly, his mouth tightening in parts, his brows pulling together. When he finished, he let out a long breath. He said it sounded like Dad was finally looking at himself, really looking, for the first time. I nodded, unable to trust my voice yet. I felt wrung out and strangely clear at the same time. At my next appointment, I brought the letter to Dr. Brooks. I sat on her couch, the paper folded and unfolded again between my fingers. She asked if I wanted to read parts of it aloud or if I would prefer she read it silently. I handed it over and asked her to read it herself. She took her time. I watched her eyes move across the lines. Her expression shifted in small ways. Her lips pressed together, then softened, her brow furrowing slightly at certain parts. When she finished, she set the letter down gently on the table between us and looked at me. She said that this was not a perfect letter. There were still places where he centered his own experience, places where he talked more about his suffering than the impact it had on me. But she also said that for the first time in my story, he was taking real ownership. She called it accountability, not just an apology. She said an apology says, "I am sorry you are hurt." Accountability said, "I know what I did that hurt you, and I am willing to face it." I felt that difference, like a shift in air pressure. I told her that reading his words hurt deeply, but it also felt like someone had finally turned on a light in a room I had been stumbling through for half my life. She nodded and asked what I wanted to do with that light. The question startled me. I had been so focused on what my dad was or was not doing that I had not thought clearly about what I needed next. After a moment, I said that I did not want to rush into forgiving him just because he was finally doing the work he should have started years ago. I did not want to step back into the same patterns just because he sounded different on paper. She agreed. She reminded me that I had a say in how this relationship would look going on forward, or if it would exist at all. She suggested that instead of focusing on how to respond emotionally to them, I might consider what concrete boundaries I needed in order to feel safe if I chose to have any contact with him. The word boundaries made my stomach flip a little. I was not used to thinking about limits with my dad. For years, every interaction had been on his terms. I sat there, the idea taking shape slowly. A list, maybe. Not a list of demands, but a list of what I was and was not willing to accept. No more comments about how I looked like my mom. No more invitations that switched at the last minute. No more pretending nothing had happened when years of hurt hung between us. By the time I left her office, the beginnings of that list had formed in my mind like faint ink on a page, waiting to be traced. That night, back at Ethan's townhouse, I sat at his kitchen table with a blank notebook in front of me and a pen in my hand. The house was quiet. Ethan had gone to bed early. The only sound was the humming of the refrigerator and the occasional car. Passing outside, I stared at the empty page, my dad's letter folded beside it, and took a slow breath. For the first time, I was not asking what he wanted from me. I was going to decide what I needed from him. Chapter 8. And this time, I would be the one setting the terms. The list did not appear all at once. It came in waves over the next few days, between naps and cups of tea, and the slow process of feeling my body come back to itself. I kept the notebook on the coffee table at Ethan's townhouse, the pen tucked into the spiral. Every time a boundary rose in my chest, I wrote it down. No more comments about how I look like my mom. No more acting as if holidays are optional for me. No more pretending nothing happened when something very big has happened. If he wants a relationship with me, he has to stay in therapy. If I say I need space, he has to respect it. I took that list to my next session with Dr. Brooks. She read through it carefully, nodding slowly. She said that each boundary sounded clear and fair. She reminded me that boundaries are not about controlling someone else. They are about saying what I will and will not allow in my own life. By the time Ethan drove me back to my apartment a week later, I felt fragile, but strangely grounded. Luna had stocked my fridge and left sticky notes on everything. Little messages like, "You deserve rest," and "One day at a time." The apartment felt different now. Less like a lonely box, and more like a place I might learn to belong only to myself. 2 days after I moved back home, my phone buzzed while I was watching some mindless show. It was a text from Ethan. "Dad wants to know if he can send you something. A letter or email. No pressure, just asking." I stared at the message for a long moment, then wrote back that he could send an email, but that I did not want any surprise visits or late-night calls. Later that evening, my inbox chimed. It was from my dad. The subject line was simply, "My thoughts." I read it twice before answering. He said he had read my list. He said that some of it scared him because it meant he could not go back to pretending. He said he was willing to try anyway. At the end of the email, he asked if I would ever consider meeting him in person. He suggested a coffee shop downtown, a public place, neutral ground. He said he would understand if I said no. I did not answer that night, or the next. In my next appointment, I told Dr. Brooks about his request. We talked through what a first meeting should and should not be. She suggested that I decide ahead of time how long I wanted to stay and what. Topics were completely off limits for now. She also suggested I have a safety plan, someone I could call or text if I started to feel overwhelmed. So a few days later, when I finally typed out a reply to my dad saying that I would meet him, I did it with those guidelines in mind. I told him we could meet for coffee at a little place in downtown Portland that I liked. A cozy shop called Cedar Street Cafe. I said we would stay for no more than an hour. I said that we would talk about simple things to start. Work and health, nothing heavy. I made it clear that if at any point I felt unsafe emotionally, I would leave. He wrote back within an hour, saying he was grateful for any time I was willing to give. The night before we were supposed to meet, my stomach was a knot. I kept picturing every version of him I had known. The cold man at my graduation, the angry man on the porch at Christmas, the panicked man on the kitchen floor called an ambulance. I texted Ethan and told him when and where we were meeting. I added that if things went bad, I wanted him to come in. He wrote back that he would be 5 minutes away, sitting in his car, waiting for my signal. The day of the coffee meeting was cool and gray, typical for January in Portland. I parked a block away from the cafe and walked slowly, the damp air brushing my cheeks, my hands deep in my coat pockets. My heart thudded a little faster with every step. Inside Cedar Street Cafe, the air was warm and smelled like espresso and baked bread. Soft music played in the background, and people sat at small tables with laptops and mugs. It was the kind of place where no one shouted and no one stared. I arrived 10 minutes early, on purpose. I wanted a seat where I could see the door. I ordered chamomile tea because my stomach could not handle coffee. The girl behind the counter smiled and called my name when it was ready. I took the mug to a table near the window and sat with my back against the wall. 2 minutes before our meeting time, I saw his truck pull up through the glass. My breath caught. He sat in the cab for a moment, hands gripping the wheel, then finally stepped out. He looked older than I remembered. There was more gray in his hair, deeper lines around his mouth. He paused just inside the door, squinting a little as his eyes adjusted from the gray daylight to the warm interior. When he spotted me, he did not wave. He walked slowly toward my table like a man approaching the edge of a cliff. When he reached me, he stopped, leaving a respectful distance between us. He said in a low voice that he was grateful I came. No jokes, no small talk, just that simple sentence. I nodded and said I had about an hour. He went to the counter and ordered plain coffee. When he came back, he asked if he could sit across from me. I said yes. For a moment, we just sat there, two people who shared blood and a history so tangled, it was hard to know where to begin. I wrapped my hands around my mug to keep them from shaking. He asked how my head was. I told him the headaches were less frequent now. He asked about work, if my boss had been understanding. I said that she had, and that I was working part-time for a couple of weeks. I asked about his back, the one that always gave him trouble in winter, and he seemed surprised I remembered. He said it was about the same. The conversation moved like that at first. Safe, surface level, weather, health, work, little things that did not touch the fault line running between us. He told me that therapy was harder than he expected. He said he had not realized how many memories he had shoved into dark corners and bricked over. He said that his therapist kept asking him to say out loud things he had only ever been willing to think in half-formed ways. He paused then, staring into his coffee. I could see him weighing whether to keep going. He said that the therapist had asked him about my mom a lot, about who she was before she left, about how their marriage fell apart, about how it felt when she walked out. He started to say that the therapist told him he had turned me into her, replacement in his mind, that he had treated me like a stand-in for her. He started to say that every time he saw my face, he saw Linda, and in that moment, his voice stumbled. He stopped himself mid-sentence, inhaled sharply, and shook his head. Then he looked up at me with eyes that were suddenly wet and said he was sorry, that I was not her, that he needed to stop talking about me like I was. The words hung between us, small but heavy. I felt something loosen in my chest. It did not erase anything. It did not smooth over the past, but it mattered to hear him correct himself out loud instead of just in his own head. We sat in that quiet for a long breath. Then I told him about my therapy. Not all of it, just enough. I said that I was learning how to stop blaming myself for things I did not cause. I said I was trying to treat myself with the kindness I had kept trying to earn from him. He listened, really listened. He did not interrupt. He did not roll his eyes or change the subject. He nodded slowly and said that the therapist had told him the same thing, that I had spent years paying for his pain. We did not talk about the key or the kitchen floor or Christmas. Not yet. That felt too sharp for a first meeting. Instead, we let this be what it was, a cautious test to see if we could sit across from each other without tearing. Old wounds open. After about 40 minutes, my tea was gone and his coffee had gone cold. I glanced at the time on my phone. Ethan had texted once, a simple message that said, "Just checking in. You are good." I had not answered yet. My dad followed my gaze and nodded. He said he did not want to keep me longer than I had agreed to. He said he knew he did not have the right to ask for more. We both stood up. For a second, we just looked at each other. Two people tied together by blood and history and 1,000 unsaid things. I picked up my coat and slipped my arms into the sleeves. He stepped back to give me space. There was a moment where I could have turned and walked out with a quick, polite goodbye and nothing more. It would have been easier. Instead, I heard myself say that maybe we could try this again sometime. Not a promise, not a full invitation, just a small opening. His eyes widened a fraction. He nodded slowly, as if any sudden movement might scare the moment away. He said he would follow my lead and that he was willing to wait. We walked out together, but not side by side. I reached the sidewalk first and felt my phone buzz in my pocket. Another text from Ethan, asking if it was time for him to come in. I looked back once and saw my dad standing under the awning of the cafe, one hand on the door, watching me like a man seeing a fragile bridge start to form between two cliffs. I typed a quick message to Ethan that said, "I am okay, heading home." Then I turned toward my car, the damp air cool on my face, aware that something in the space between us had shifted, just a little, and that for the first time, it did not feel immediately dangerous to imagine what might come next. Chapter 9. I typed a quick message to Ethan saying I was okay, then slid my phone back into my pocket and walked toward my car. The cool air felt cleaner than when I arrived, as if the entire world had exhaled with me. I did not feel healed. I did not feel fixed, but something had shifted. Just enough to let a sliver of light in. 2 days later, my dad asked if I would stop by his place for a short visit. Just a light meal, nothing formal. He said he wanted to show me something, but only if I felt ready. I took a long time to answer. In the end, I said yes, because I wanted to know what a visit without cruelty or tension might feel like. Saturday afternoon, I drove to the house I had grown up in. The driveway looked the same. The porch looked the same. Even the wind chimes by the door were the same ones I used to listen to on summer nights when I could not sleep. Everything familiar and unfamiliar at once. My dad opened the door before I even stepped onto the second stair. He did not smile too big or too bright. He just nodded and said he was glad I made it. I could tell he had cleaned the house earlier. The carpets looked vacuumed, and the faint scent of lemon cleaner lingered in the air. He had made a small lunch, just sliced fruit, sandwiches, and iced tea. Simple things that did not try too hard. We sat at the kitchen table, where I had collapsed weeks earlier. The memory hovered in the edges of the room, but he did not try to pretend it had not happened. He just asked if my energy had been better lately. I told him it had. We ate slowly. It was one of the first meals I ever had with him that did not feel like I was waiting for something to go wrong. Halfway through the meal, he cleared his throat and gestured toward the living room. He said there was something he wanted to show me, if I felt all right. The way he asked made something warm and unsettled rise in my chest. I nodded, though I had no idea what to expect. We walked together into the living room. On the coffee table, sat a worn, leather-bound album. I recognized it immediately. It had been on the bookshelf my entire childhood, but I was always told it was full of old wedding photos and to leave it alone. I never questioned it. He sat on the couch and motioned for me to join him. I sat an arm's length away, nervous and curious. He placed his hand on the album, but did not open it right away. He said he had been going through boxes in the attic after a session with his therapist. He said he found things he had forgotten he kept. He said this album had never been about my mom at all. Then he opened it. The first picture was of me at about 7, holding a soccer ball on the field behind my elementary school. My hair was in 2 uneven pigtails, and my shoelaces were untied. I remembered that game. I thought he had not shown up that day. He turned the page. Another picture of me reading on the front porch, legs curled beneath me. I recognized the blanket draped over my shoulders. It was one Grandma crocheted when I was 10. Another page, a photo of me on stage at my piano recital, the one from middle school. I was in the second row of performers, waiting for my turn. Whoever took the photo had zoomed in on my face, catching an expression of nervous determination I did not know anyone else had ever seen. There were more. Me at age 12, running toward the school bus. Me at age 15, painting a science project late at night. Me at age 17, standing in the backyard, looking at the sky, unaware of the camera completely. They were not all perfect photos. Some were blurry. Some were crooked. All of them were moments of my life I had thought went unnoticed. I felt my throat tighten and my hands go still in my lap. My dad kept turning pages carefully, as if the photographs were fragile. After a while, he stopped and rested his palms on the open book. He said he had taken most of the pictures himself. He said that every time he saw me doing something normal and beautiful, like reading or laughing or working on school stuff, he would take a picture because he wanted to remember the parts of me that felt easy to love. Then he admitted he could never bring himself to show them to me. He looked down when he said that. His voice dropped lower, rougher. I was not the father you deserved. I was angry and scared and too proud to tell the truth, so I hid behind that anger. I took these pictures because I wanted to keep you close, even when I could not face you. You deserved a dad who showed up, and instead, you got a man hiding behind a camera and a broken heart. I blinked hard because the tears came fast. Not loud tears, quiet, shaking ones that made my chest feel too small. He kept his gaze fixed on the album, like he knew looking at me would break him. He said he did not expect forgiveness, and he did not expect things to go back to what they never were. He said he just needed me to know that even when he treated me like a reminder of what he lost, he had been watching me with pride he didn't know how to express. The room felt heavy and still. The past swirled around us, not in a violent way, but in a way that made both of us sit a little straighter, breathe a little deeper. I closed the album gently with my hands. I needed a moment. I needed air. He nodded as if he knew. I still walked down the hall to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. When I came back out, he was sitting exactly where I left him, hands folded, staring at the album like it was a confession he had finally laid down. I told him I needed to go home for now. He nodded again. He walked me to the door, but did not try to hug me. He said he hoped we could keep trying, even slowly. I stepped out onto the porch, the late afternoon light softening the edges of everything. I told him I would be in touch. Then I got into my car and drove home, letting the emotions swirl and settle in their own uneven way. When I reached my apartment and set my keys down, I realized my phone had been buzzing in my purse. I pulled it out and saw a notification in my inbox. A new email. The sender's name froze my breath. It was my mom. The subject line was empty. The preview text read, "I heard you were in the hospital. I'm sorry." My fingers tightened around the phone. The room suddenly felt too quiet. Old wounds, ones older than the ones with my dad, began to stir like they had been waiting in the dark all along. I lowered myself onto the couch, staring at her name, feeling the past gather itself again like a storm outside a door I was not sure I wanted to open. Old wounds stirred inside me as I stared at my mom's name on the screen. "I heard you were in the hospital. I am sorry." The message was short but sharp, like she had cracked the door open just enough for memory to rush in. I set the phone down, closed my eyes, and breathed the way Dr. Brooks had taught me. When my heartbeat steadied, I read the email again. Nothing about why she left. Nothing about the years of silence. Just an apology floating in a thin space between us. I sat at my kitchen table with a glass of water, letting the ache settle. For the first time, I realized I had choices with her. I didn't have to slam the door, and I didn't have to pull her inside either. Later that night, I replied simply that I appreciated her reaching out, but I wasn't ready for more than occasional email. I hit send and felt a strange calm, like placing a stone exactly where it belonged. My focus shifted back to my dad, to the fragile bridge we were building, piece by piece. Over the next weeks, he stayed in therapy, something Grandma confirmed gently each time she called. Ethan said Dad was talking less about his own hurt and more about ours. It was still awkward, still uneven, but undeniably real. One quiet afternoon, I sat again at my dining table with a blank card in front of me. I'd been thinking about writing my dad a letter that wasn't about punishment or blame, but clarity. I wanted him to know where I stood and what I needed going forward. The words came slowly but steadily. I wrote that I saw his effort, that I wasn't pretending the past didn't happen, that I was willing to walk forward but not backward. I wrote that love couldn't be rebuilt on apologies alone. It needed actions repeated over time, and I wrote the truth I had carried for too long. I was done shaping myself into someone easier for him to love. If he wanted a relationship now, it had to be with the real me. When I sealed the envelope and dropped it into the mailbox outside my building, the metal door clanged loud in the cold air. It sounded like something ending and something beginning all at once. A week later, he called and asked if I would walk with him at the river park. Neutral ground, no expectations. I agreed. It was early spring, the kind where the air smelled like rain, and everything green was just beginning to return. My dad was waiting near the entrance, hands in his jacket pockets. He didn't rush toward me or try to hug me. He just nodded. And somehow that small gesture felt exactly right. We started walking along the path. The gravel crunched under our shoes. The river moved steadily beside us. We talked first about simple things, the kind of conversations people have when they're trying to relearn one another. Work, Grandma's new doctor, Ethan's projects, Luna's promotion. Nothing heavy, nothing sharp. Then the silence shifted. He slowed his steps and told me he'd read my letter twice the night it arrived, and once the next morning. He said some lines hurt, but the hurt felt honest, not like punishment, more like waking up after being asleep too long. I told him I needed to say something, and I needed him to listen without interrupting. He nodded. I told him that those lost years weren't coming back. The birthdays that felt like afterthoughts. The graduations where he drifted in and out like a guest. The Christmas Eve where he chose pride over compassion. Those years were gone. Nothing he did now would make them what they could have been. He swallowed and looked toward the river. His eyes shone in the dim light. But, I said, I am willing to build something with you for the years we still have. I'm willing to move forward, slowly, if you really want to. Not pretending, not rewriting, but building. He stood there for a long moment, blinking away tears he didn't try to hide. When he spoke, his voice cracked. I do. I really do. We kept walking. No dramatic hug, no sudden healing, just two people with shared blood and shared damage taking careful steps in the same direction. And it felt like enough. The weeks that followed had an ordinary rhythm. He stayed in therapy. I stayed in mine. We met sometimes for coffee, sometimes for a walk, sometimes for nothing more than a short conversation that didn't hurt either of us. When he slipped into old habits, I held my boundary. When I grew cold with caution, he stepped back and tried again. Slowly, something new formed. Not the father and daughter we once might have been. That version died years ago. This was quieter, smaller, realer. Two adults meeting in the middle, carrying the truth between them instead of pretending it had never existed. One warm summer evening, I sat on my balcony with a glass of iced tea and replayed the journey in my head. Mind. The porch on Christmas Eve. The collapse on the kitchen floor. The hospital curtain. The letters. The therapy sessions. The album of photos he'd hidden because he didn't know how to love me and look at me at the same time. Revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's silence where there used to be begging. Sometimes it's distance where there used to be desperation. Sometimes it's choosing your own peace over their comfort. Sometimes it's simply telling the truth and letting the truth rearrange them. Room. I didn't burn bridges. I didn't shout. I didn't fight back with the same cruelty I'd been given. My revenge was quieter. I stopped chasing the love I deserved and started giving it to myself first. Everything else followed from there. If you've ever been told you were too much or not enough for your own family, remember this: silence can be power, and truth can be the loudest revenge. Tell me in the comments what integrity means to you and where you're listening from.